Hey everybody, Tab here with Real Michigan Anglers, and today we're going to talk about some basics for king salmon fishing with beads. So I just got into bead fishing for king salmon last year and experimented with it a little bit on the river and had some luck. So I want to help you guys get started, show you what size hooks to use, what size beads to use, what kind of pegs to use, and some other basic rigging stuff and tips. So let's take a look real quick at the beads themselves. This is my modest little king salmon bead collection. So this is a little box of mostly 16 and 14, but also a few 12 millimeter beads. So 12 millimeter beads would be the smaller side of what's appropriate for king salmon, and anything bigger than 16 is kind of crazy. There's people out there that use things bigger, but for the most part, that's all you really need is 12, 16, and 14. Okay, so let's talk about hook sizes. So I made a little chart here because this is kind of a confusing thing, and a lot of people that I have talked to are like, what's going on? Myself included when I first started learning about this. Let me put this where we can see it. So a size 8 or 10 would be the smallest size hook, right? So small on the left, working our way up to bigger size hooks. So our typical steelhead hooks are on this side. 8s, 6s, 4s. I actually used 2s for steelhead the whole season, from winter through spring last year. Every single fish I caught was caught on the Blood Run Skein size 2. So a lot of people would argue that's on the high end of what's acceptable for steelhead. The idea being the smaller the hook, the less likely you are to spook them. I just bought a bunch of 2s, and that's what worked good for me. So going up from there, 2s, 1. Once you hit 1, everything gets crazy. I don't think there's a 0 at all. It just goes straight to what we call a 1-aught. A 1/0 is a 1-aught. 1, 2, 3-aught, all the way up to, I don't even know how big they get. 8-aught is a huge hook. That's for like catfish or sturgeon or something like that. Okay, so in most salmon rivers, you can't use a hook that has a gap larger than a 1/2 inch. So if you're salmon fishing, you shouldn't be using anything bigger than a 1/2 inch, even if for some reason it is legal, which I don't think there's a single river where that is legal. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. So when we talk about a 1/2 inch, we're talking about the gap. We're talking about the space between the point of the hook and the shank of the hook. So if you throw that on your tape measure sideways, that would be the other way around. If that line represents the tape measure, you want to measure the distance from there to there. So on a 2-aught Blood Run Skein hook, the distance between the point of the hook and the shaft is exactly a 1/2 inch. So a 2-aught is going to be the biggest that you can legally use in most Michigan rivers. Okay? So anything bigger than 2-aught you want to avoid for salmon fishing. So now let's talk about how to match the correct hook size to bead size, because what you don't want to do is use a little size 8 hook with a big size 16 bead. Look, the bead's much bigger than the hook. Now this isn't an actual size drawing, but it illustrates my point. So if the bead is bigger than the hook, you're not going to get good hookups. So here is my recommendations for the right hook size to use with the right bead size. So 12 millimeter beads, a size 4 to a size 2 is appropriate for 12 millimeter. You can go bigger, but there's really no need to, and honestly you're better off keeping things smaller as often as you can to not spook fish. Okay, if you're using a size 14 millimeter bead. You want the size 2 to a 1/0. Okay. I was using, like I said, the size 2s for everything last year, and I did throw 14 millimeter beads, and I did catch fish on the 14 millimeter beads with the size 2. So don't be afraid that that's too small, but if you are, go to the 1 or the 1/0. Alright? For a 16 millimeter bead, I would recommend a minimum size of 1 and a maximum size of 2/0 because it's illegal to go any bigger. And realistically, that 2/0 is a pretty big hook anyways. So if you're searching for trophies and you want to get that big guy, get your heavy fluorocarbon leader out, 20 pound or more, and that big old 2/0 hook, get her done. Alright, so here I have a blood run skein hook, size 1/0, tied to a 20 pound fluorocarbon leader. I'm using P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon, that's my preference. Okay, so I've got that all tied on. I'm just going to take a bead, slip that on the other end, and then feed that through until I hook myself in the hand. And then I'm going to take a bead peg. So for bead pegs, I like the Mr. Dirks pegs because they're a little fatter in the midsection. They're the same size as a normal peg on the ends, but the extra little girth here allows me to use less of the peg, which means that I can use both sides and sometimes also the middle, and sometimes get 3 beads pegged on with just 1 peg. So I like those Mr. Dirks pegs. It's not a bad idea to have a few other pegs, a variety, if you will, because sometimes you might get a bead that has a slight defect on the inside of the hole and the peg doesn't want to go through, so then having a smaller peg will be advantageous in that case. So I'm getting it on there, getting it tight. A lot of people like to go 3 finger lengths. I like to go just a little farther myself, something like that. That's like almost, it's actually just a tad more than 4 finger lengths. And you can play around with that, you can go a little closer. I wouldn't recommend going a whole lot farther than that. And then once you're right where you want to be, you just kind of want to make sure that's nice and tight there. And then we're going to trim that off, being very careful not to clip the line. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. And when you are on the side of the river, re-rigging after getting broken off, and you can't wait to get your presentation back in place and hook up again, that kind of stuff will make you right mad. Okay, I'm going to clip this one off. I'm clipping them really close so that we don't lose the aerodynamic or hydrodynamic quality of the circle bead. If you want to leave a little bit extra coming out, you can. It doesn't really mess things up too much, but you can take advantage of different colors so that you can add little accents if you like. Chartreuse is always a good accent color, so I have chartreuse as well as clear, and white. White is also a great accent color. Okay, so now I have my hook on my leader line with my bead, and this is like a, I don't know, a 2-foot leader, I guess. So once you get to that step, then you can hook it to your rig, whatever your rig may be. In this case, I'm rigging for float fishing. So I've got my float here. This is a Nova Tackle 3/8 ounce or 10.5 gram jig. So 10.5 grams means that it can hold 10.5 grams of weight. Doesn't mean you need to have 10.5 grams of weight on it. Often I'll just have a couple split shots like so. And then this is actually my old leader line from the last time I was fishing. I got broken off. Probably a tree, if I recall correctly. Or no, it was like a stump or something in the water. I don't throw in trees, that's not my style. Okay, so I've clipped that off. Now all I have to do is, if you can't tell, I have a little swivel right here. I want to put this closer so you can see it better actually. There we go. It's attached to my rod, so I've got this little barrel swivel, and I'm just going to go through, and you can do two different things. You could do a polymer knot or a fisherman's knot. Fisherman's knot is the one where you twist and loop. I'm going to do a polymer knot. I like the polymer knot with this rig for one very specific reason. The polymer knot is super duper strong. Oops, I'm about to do that wrong. The polymer knot is super strong and less likely to break than other types of knots. So when I do a polymer knot up top, I find that when I do break off, I will most likely break off somewhere near the hook, usually where the bead is pegged or where the hook attaches to the line, or somewhere in between the two is usually where it ends up breaking off. And that means I still have a chunk of leader line. I can tie another hook on the end if I want and snell it on, or I can start over if the leader line is too short. But it gives me options and makes it less likely to break off. So this is in this case my leader line is actually heavier than my main line because this is my Skimania setup. So I've got a pretty light main line compared to what I would use for salmon. So for salmon, your main line should be no less than 20 pounds. 30 is cool. Some people like to go 50, 60 and whatnot. I don't think that's necessary at all. I don't think anything above 30 is necessary ever, really. Maybe for muskies or sturgeon, or I don't know. King salmon in super heavy cover, like if you're trying to rip king salmon out of branches and like logs and stuff, then yeah, I can see going above 30 pound. But otherwise, I would recommend 30 pound. You can go mono or braid. Most people prefer braid. I'm running braid this season. Braided main line. I think I'm gonna run a bumper line, a very short bumper probably, in fluorocarbon, or actually mono, for that little extra stretch. And then I'm gonna be using the fluorocarbon leaders with the beads, just like so. So that's our setup. And then once you get to that point, you can slide this bobber up and down. You can move these weights around. Maybe you want 2 up top to keep the bobber running straight, 1 on bottom. Maybe you want 2 on bottom so that you know it's getting down there. Maybe you want to add like 5 more. Maybe you want to do a tapered shot pattern. That's all your personal preference. But I hope that was helpful information, especially the part about the hook sizes and which sizes to use with which beads, that kind of thing. Okay, all that being said, you can use whatever type of hook you're comfortable with, whatever type of bead peg you prefer, whatever brand beads you like. That stuff's really all personal preference. I like beads from Bloop the most. I'm also a fan of Slan Steel and Mr. Dirk's beads. I just got some Mr. Dirk's beads that they threw in for free with my pegs the other day, and those things are sweet looking. So there's lots of options out there. There's several others that I didn't mention. You can also go to the craft store and make your own beads. You know, there's lots of options. So the more important thing is having a variety of color options as well as a variety of size options, and that's really the most important factor, in my opinion. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I will catch you in the next video.